Lily Allen. Uh, Lily Allen had an interesting moment, a very sad moment on her podcast. I think this was last week. And I just want to roll this clip, and we're then going to transition to Cynthia Nixon in just a moment. But this is F5. Take a listen.
Abortions. I've had a few, right. But then again, I can't remember exactly how many.
What, really?
Yeah.
Why didn't this come up in last week's episode? We were just talking about abortions.
Because I was just letting you run with it.
Reveal everything.
I can't remember. Yeah, I think maybe like, I want to say 4 or 5.
Yeah, I've had about 5 too. Lily, I'm so happy I can say that, and you can say it, and no one came to shoot us down.
I mean, why would anyone come to shoot you down? I don't know. The mere fact that they feel like they have to find solidarity in one another, I think speaks to the obvious trauma that comes along with abortion, and the industry has obviously tried to create as little friction as is possible. Abortions are actually up post-Dobbs, largely due to mifepristone and abortion pill prescriptions that have been spread around the country that are really sold as a kind of a frictionless experience. One of the sort of most painless ways to go about a very painful process. I'm speaking emotionally, but in this case, it also does turn out to often be physically very painful. And I know a lot of people disagree with this on the right. I'm more anti-abortion than most people on the right, and I want to get into a little bit before we run of where I come from on this issue. Let's put up here. I have it in front of me, and I'm going to put this on the screen because shortly after that Lily Allen little song, Cynthia Nixon, obviously a sort of very prominent left-wing activist, so it's not surprising, but Cynthia Nixon Instagrammed this picture on a very pristine-looking boat, maybe yacht, I don't know for sure. That would be called Below Deck Hell. No, I'm kidding. But in a hat that says, it's a Trump-coded hat that says, "Make abortion great again." So it looks like a MAGA hat, and then if you read the text closer, it says, "Make abortion great again." Well, why do I bring up the boat? Well, I bring up the boat because after Roe, or I think this was shortly before Roe, I went back and I crunched some of the numbers. So the New York Times wrote in 2019 that women getting abortions today are far more likely to be poor than those who had the procedure done 20 years ago, and says about half of women who had an abortion in 2014 were below the poverty line, with another quarter very close to poverty. But if you compare that number to Gallup data, there's a, I think, really important takeaway about class that comes out. Gallup data from 2021 found that respondents asked whether abortion was morally wrong, morally acceptable, or dependent on the situation were more supportive as yearly household income increased. This is, I put some of these charts together in an article at the Federalist back at the time. Above the $100,000 income threshold, 63% of people said abortion was morally acceptable and 32% said morally wrong. Below the $40,000 threshold, those numbers were almost reversed. Only 38% of respondents said it was morally acceptable, while 55% said it was morally wrong. This pattern was consistent among Gallup's research on the question in recent years, and on Roe in particular, there was a 2020 survey, again from the New York Times, that showed a similar pattern on education levels. So while respondents of every education level supported Roe in much higher numbers than they opposed it at the time, support, you will not be surprised to hear, decreased alongside educational attainment, while opposition increased. And so I say this all because there is a tendency among affluent liberal women to claim the mantle of protecting vulnerable, disadvantaged women. If you look at those numbers, in all likelihood, a lot of those vulnerable, disadvantaged women that the sort of liberal activists like a Cynthia Nixon or a Lily Allen, liberal celebrity activists, purport to be championing, likely many of them feel forced into the situation. Maybe forced by a man, maybe forced by financial circumstances, but it makes it when you think about that, probably an even more painful experience for women who don't believe, as the polling shows, that it's morally acceptable. That was the term Gallup polled, or so they polled morally wrong, morally acceptable, or dependent on the situation. And it's just a really twisted thing to do, to say make abortion great again, to put that on a hat as a wealthy multimillionaire celebrity, currently with 2 major shows on HBO, right? Gilded Age, which by the way I love, lots of thoughts, and the Sex and the City reboot is, what's it called? And Just Like That, something that's also on HBO right now. To be posing with that hat, make abortion great again. I would love to sit down in front of Cynthia Nixon and ask her what she means by great. Does she mean empowering? Does she mean financially liberating? Because I bet a lot of the vulnerable, underprivileged women that she purports to champion would reflect on their experiences with abortion, not by singing it, as Lily Allen did, but by mourning it, and with deep, deep sorrow. And there's a psychological analysis that you can go into here with Lily Allen, and obviously I am no therapist. God forbid someone ever sit down across from me as their therapist. But there's a pretty obvious armchair analysis that there's some coping happening, and some attempt to persuade and convince yourself. You actually kind of saw it happening in real time in that Lily Allen podcast segment, to try and feel light and to try to bring levity to the situation. And if I go back to the Cynthia Nixon Instagram, and I'm going to put this on the screen, there's a couple comments here that I find interesting. One person says, I'm pro-choice, and I think that hat is absolutely repulsive and disgraceful. I am pro-choice, another person says, but celebrating abortion as great is something only a vapid ghoul would say. So another person adds, pro-life or pro-choice, there isn't anything great about abortions. Sick. This is actually Naomi Wolf wrote an essay in, this was like the New Republic in the late 90s. Kind of thinking about how if you are an honest pro-abortion feminist, and she was at the time, I actually haven't kept up with where Naomi Wolf is on abortion now, because she's had sort of an evolution, but Naomi Wolf said at the time, you have to basically embrace those graphic images that anti-abortion protesters kind of walk around with all of the time, outside of abortion clinics and all of that, because you have to embrace the reality that, if you're being honest with women, if you're being honest with yourself, that that is the stage of fetal development, baby development, that is being terminated at particular stages of the pregnancy. And Christopher Hitchens was, people are often surprised to learn, very heterodox for the crowd that he mingled with, and was spoiling a lot of people's abortion parades back when he was alive, and saying basically you had the onus is on you to tell us when life begins in a way that actually makes sense. Otherwise, there's no other way to see abortion than taking away a life. Now, I didn't mean to delve into a long sort of fundamental debate about the morality of abortion. I just really wanted to talk about how it should be so obscene. It should be seen as obscene and deeply hypocritical for people who claim to champion women in disadvantaged situations, to be making light of abortion, to be talking about abortion as something that is quote unquote great, worthy of a cute little song. It's just incredibly, like, in the same way that I will be honest that I have a position that is not in the mainstream of the American public's position on this issue. Actually, of all people, Donald Trump's position on this issue, even if you don't like his policies or the judges he appointed to the Supreme Court, all fair points of contention if you're pro-abortion. But I think his point to push the Republican Party on this is probably more in touch with the average American than, I am. I certainly will concede to that. But this isn't it either.